Warning, the following video contains strong language which may be offensive to some viewers and/or inappropriate for children. The content within this video is intended for mature audiences only.
Hi, and welcome to Through Kaleidoscope Eyes, a weekly show where we tell stories of unsung heroes one at a time within the LGBTQIA plus community and allies. We will also be discussing various topics with each special guest. I'm your host, LaCrosse Ortiz. All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Through Kaleidoscope Eyes. I'm your host, LaCrosse Ortiz, and I guess I'll give you a little bit of what Through Kaleidoscope Eyes is. Through Kaleidoscope Eyes is basically it's like little biographies of people within the community who kind of have given something to the community. So it's basically their story. And growing up, my grandfather used to love to tell stories, and I love hearing stories and I love telling stories. And I feel everybody's story is unique and everybody has a voice and each voice should be heard. So basically every week I will be having a different guest to tell their life story. Whether you're an ally or you're in the LGBTQIA plus community, you get to tell your story. Now this week we have a dear friend of mine all the way from Boulder, Colorado. You know them as Hollis Taylor, also AKA Izzy Ahee. Our guest is trans man, identifies as trans man, and non-binary. Hollis is a psychic activist medium, an artist, an astrologer, author. The list goes on and on as to what Hollis brings to the table. They had traveled the country, going from place to place with healing, health, and with music, dance, whatever spirituality that they could bring. And Hollis and I had connected in a pretty interesting way. But without further ado, I want to bring on Hollis. So let's give a warm welcome. Hey Hollis, how are you?
I'm excellent. So glad to be on your show today. I love this idea. I love your show already.
You.
I just love the idea. Like, yeah.
I think it's neat because like people always like see stories from like celebrities, and yeah, that's great, but they don't speak for all of us. Like, I mean, I love Laverne Cox, but she doesn't speak for me. I love Chaz Bono, but he doesn't speak for me. Each story within the LGBT is so unique, and it needs to be heard. So, delving right in, I want you to let our viewers know. Tell us about yourself.
Well, first of all, I am an author. I am a coach, but I'm a little bit different in my coaching because I use astrology and tarot and psychic things and things like that. And I use those because those are the tools I use to overcome my own traumas. So I want to welcome the idea to think outside the box of how to heal or how to get better or change your life. So that's who I am, really. And I have been around the country and I guess have traveled the world a little bit, hopefully to travel more. And I seen the country in a van. So
that must have been interesting.
Yeah, it was a very interesting perspective. It was really great to see the national parks and to see our wilderness. I was very lucky to manifest that by simply going to nursing homes. So that's how I did that. So amazing. It's all got a cool story behind it, but that's pretty much who I am. I have a lot of things that I do and offer the world.
Awesome. Well, I want you to, what was it like growing up as Hollis?
Well, first of all, I was born into a home that was abusive, neglectful. It was pretty much dysfunction junction. Both my parents had a drinking problem. My mom also had a drug problem. Eventually, my dad actually got sober just before I was born, which I was very, very grateful for. And he was actually blind. And when my parents got divorced at the young age of 5, I really lost my father. Like, I really missed him. And I was very grateful when my parents were able to work it out so I could see my dad.
Right.
And so my dad and I were actually quite close, and I was a bit of a caregiver for him. But he was also very present with me, even though it was just on the weekends in these short little spurts. But for those spurts, I had a parent.
Right.
For those spurts, I had someone that loved me and someone that celebrated me. During the other times, there was mostly nobody around. I kind of grew up alone all the time, latchkey kid. Nobody was ever there. My mom was usually out partying. Later, she got sober when I was 11 or 12. During that time, I'm just going to give you a little trigger warning. I was sexually abused. And, you know, I was abused and raped because there was no one in the home to pay attention, you know, and that's what happens. And my family was also incestuous. And I think all of that stemmed from my mom's trauma, who also had a similar childhood that I just described. And as we know, sometimes these things are passed down in generations when they're not dealt with. And it was clearly not dealt with. When I was 12 years old, my mom had a mental breakdown because she remembered what happened to her. So it was a really, what I would call, an awful childhood. I'm sure it could have been worse. It definitely could have been better. And at the same time, it also made me who I am. So I've come to terms with it now. And I've done a lot of emotional work using some pretty unusual tools to overcome not just the trauma of living in that home, but also realizing that I was non-binary, coming to terms with being my gender variance. My gender variance was always there. I always actually thought I had both, which is kind of like being intersex, but not really. Like, I wasn't born that way, and intersex people have their whole separate journey, and they're totally interesting, great people. Right. And they have their own troubles to overcome. Mine was like, I thought something was wrong with me because my dysphoria felt like I had both body parts. So my dysphoria was a little bit different than the average trans man. But at the same time, as time went on, I felt that I had to work through the trauma of all the crap I went through as a kid in order to really determine if I was truly trans.
Yeah, I realized a lot with mine, I started with therapy, and yeah, you have to get through a lot of that childhood trauma because, I mean, when I think of mine, it was very abusive as well. I don't want to say I overcame it, but I'd like to say that I made space for it. In other words, because like you said, it helps create who you are, you know, and there were many things is that, like, as a parent, when I ended up becoming a parent, I realized, I'm not going to do this, or I'm not going to do that. Someone has to stop that cycle of abuse. And like you were saying, you know, if it's not dealt with, it's just going to keep repeating. History keeps repeating itself. And I know when I had my children, I was just like, I'm going to do the complete opposite of what they did. And I guess, I don't know, maybe I did a different type of trauma to my kids. I don't know. I'd hate to think I did, but, you know, I like to think that I made space for that, and you learn to live with it. And, you know, some days are better than others, you know?
Well, I also have changed the way I interact with the world by doing things like CBT and EBT, which is like tapping, and I also do a lot of yoga and meditation, and I do what they call alchemy. I've really shifted, and I also had the same experience as you. When I got pregnant at 17, I didn't want to do what my mom did to me, right? I had that same, like, I can't do the same thing. So I did make some mistakes. I wasn't a perfect parent, but I certainly did not traumatize my son the way I was traumatized at all. I was very present for him. And I was even a Boy Scout leader. Imagine that. And I went all the way. In fact, I have all the honorary Boy Scout things that make you a great leader. And and I did that with my son because he loved it until he got purple hair. They started making a big deal about being gay, and he was questioning, and so we just kind of left. So and we went into other things. So, but I was very present for my son's entire life. And I also homeschooled him for part of his education, which saved him because every time he would go to school, he would fall behind. And when he worked with me, he would get ahead. So
that's so funny because I homeschooled mine too. That's such a similar story. It was the same thing. What I felt they were teaching them was like, what the hell are you guys doing? You know, let's teach them real history. Let's teach them the truth about what's going on in society. And I ended up doing every single one of my kids I homeschooled. Now, they didn't stay with me. When they got to high school, I was just like, yeah, no, you're going to school. I did the easy years, you know, but yeah, no. And I think that's like the best thing I could have done for my kids.
I agree. I think homeschooling my son was the best thing I could have done. And I think also doing scouts with him and taking him on all the adventures that I took him and all his friends. That's really what it boiled down to. I was the leader. So the other leader with me was another mom. And we just took our kids on adventures. You know, we took them mountain biking and whitewater rafting, and, you know, and the boys raised their own money to do these things. Skiing and all kinds of things. And I think that was also a priceless experience, to be in nature, to be with nature, and to get exposed to these rather challenging things. It's not easy to backpack the Appalachian Trail.
Oh, I bet not.
No. And just we didn't do the whole trail. We just did a portion of it. And you know, we had everything we needed on our backs, but there was something that happened. I watched those boys transform in those 3 days that we were on that trail. I watched those boys. They didn't take water for granted anymore. Let's just say that.
Yeah. That's amazing. So,
and yeah, go ahead.
No, I was about to say, so basically we go through your childhood, and I know there's a subject we did want to touch, which is the sex working, I don't know, some people are triggered about that, sex working. And I really thought that would be an interesting thing for you to explain.
Well, it was kind of an interesting thing because what happened to me was I was like 17 and I was working at a warehouse. It was a really sucky job, frankly. And I was married to a man who also was gender different, but he chose to stay in the closet. But he was also open sexually. He wasn't possessive or any of those things. And we were kind of swingers, and I liked exploring my sexuality. So so I was working at this warehouse, and occasionally I would do phone sex, just for fun, just because I thought it was fun.
Right.
And the guy who I was talking to was like, "I'd pay you to do. Have you ever thought, you're really good at this. And I found
Right.
out that I was really good at it. So back then there was no cam, none of that didn't happen. So
Right.
I just started doing phone sex and I was good at it. And
Right.
I worked for a couple of services. There was some drama in there, but eventually I opened my own service, and my husband left his job at the warehouse so he could help me run my business because it was
Wow.
so busy. I couldn't manage all the books and the money, and
Right.
we were making big money.
Wow.
And we ran our business like that at home for years. And
Wow.
then uh the Twin Towers were hit in New York, and I actually had at that point had started to work in film. I started to do safe. I chose to
Mhm.
be a porn actress,
Right.
and that was actually it was great because I was doing phone sex most of the time, and then I'd make a bunch of money on the weekend or something, which was great. Now, my son was not aware of any of this. He just thought that I worked at a home and I built websites, which was true because I did.
Right.
And I built my own website. and 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 I did that for years, and he just didn't know. And
Right.
then when it came time to homeschool, I would work at night and then homeschool him, and then he would go to like his friend's house or something in the afternoon, or his dad would do something with him while I slept. And
Right.
so we just cooperated. And eventually I became an adult star. And after the Twin Towers thing happened, it was hard. I don't know what happened, but my business just went.
Mm.
And what I also realized at that time, though, was that I hadn't grown into what was happening on the internet, which was cam.
Mm.
And so I started doing cam, which was different, but and a little bit more challenging, but good at the same time. And I had all the control. Okay, just don't. There's no one manipulated me. No one forced me. I made all the choices. In fact, I used to run parties. We called them members parties because they were members of our website, right?
Mm.
And they would just come to my members party, and I was in charge of the whole thing.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
and the men that came that worked with us, not just my husband was my bodyguard.
Right.
He was 6'4". He was a huge guy. And so he could easily, just choke somebody up if they did something wrong. And
Right.
the other guys I worked with were mostly cam and tech. They would edit the videos or sell them. And I did that total, if you count the phone sex years and then eventually towards the end, I really started to experiment with BDSM, and I found that BDSM was healing some
Yeah.
of the trauma wounds
Yeah.
from my childhood, and it became priceless. Uh,
It's so sad how taboo sex and BDSM is. It's just so sad. It's everybody thinks it's so dirty and it's so this and that, and realize there's therapy within all this. It's not just acting out like in some like random thing. There is a thing here that's therapeutic, especially within the BDSM. I know I've heard countless stories of people who have found healing through BDSM because of childhood trauma.
yeah.
And that is a thing, and the whole sex work thing. I mean, I'm just pissed off. They just need to legalize it. Okay. Just
Well, everything
legalize all of it, because people are going to do it anyway. Yeah.
everything I mentioned was legal. Everything
Yeah.
I'm doing so far is legal. Although
Right.
at some point I did do some private escorting / prostitution, if that's what you want to call it.
Right.
I do believe that prostitution should be legalized.
Yeah.
It became clear to me that it was no different than giving a massage. Giving a massage, you have to use your personal energy. You have to use your hands. You have to touch them. And it kind of leads to the same place. And I had clients that I also serviced in that way. They paid me really well. I was always in control. My husband was always my bodyguard. And I just, you know, there was a lot of judgment. And that's why I didn't tell anybody. That's why I kept it a secret. And I was kind of in the closet a little bit. But in the end, now that I've left it and I'm not other than a supporter of legalizing it and happy to support anyone that's in it, especially if they're there on their own accord. You know, like now it's not such a big deal. And if somebody's going to judge me because because I was a sex worker, I don't really want to talk to them anyway.
Right, exactly. They have no place in your life because nobody has time for that type of judgment. You know, people need to, you know, it's no different than any other job. You have your 9-to-5 jobs. It's work. It is a job. You know, there are worse things people could be doing. And, you know, and to even judge, like I have, you know, like I said, I know many people within the sex working and like, you know, and they're like, they seem nervous to tell me. And I'm like, no, it's a job. It's what you do, you know, and it's not a job I could do, but then there are things that I can do that they can't do, you know, it's just to look at it for what it is, you know, and like, I can't stand the whole judgment on it. It's just ridiculous.
And there were definitely times that I had fun, you know, like, not all the time. Sometimes it was like, really? And then other times it was like, oh, this is interesting. And I was always interested to see what I would like or what I didn't like.
Right.
And BDSM definitely had its place, but it also can be addictive. All of it can be addictive. And I think that there's a balancing act. So I also learned a lot about that. And I think that because we make it shameful, because we look down on it, that we end up shaming people away from things that they're, first of all, that they're just good at. Frankly, a lot, when you talk to sex workers, sometimes you'll find out that some of us do it because we're good at it. No other reason except that, well, I'm good at it. And I was really good at it. And that's why I stayed there for 25 years. And I ran my own business. In the meantime, I learned marketing. I learned how to build my own business. I learned how to build websites and edit video and all kinds of technology. I learned how to do business with people. I learned all kinds of things.
And I have a nice comment here from Alan. You're selling a service. It's to consenting adults. There should be no issue. I mean, that's it in a nutshell. Thank you for that comment. I mean, that's it. You have 2 or more, you know, he just wrote again, 2 or more consenting adults within this act.
Right.
So what's the issue?
Right, exactly. And being a sex worker, it has some impact on you, you know, so you are impacted. Usually, though, the biggest impact is the culture's shame.
Yes, true.
That's the biggest impact
that
you have to deal with.
Patricia asks, what does that stand for? No judgment. Patricia, if you could elaborate a little more. So we could, because we would love to answer your question. If you could just elaborate a little bit more on the question, because I didn't quite understand it. And I want to make sure that the questions get answered as we go through.
Just because you ask questions, I won't assume that you're judging me.
Right. Because this is definitely safe zone, no judgment. Oh, BDSM. Oh, okay. All right. There we go.
Bondage, domination, sadism, and masochism. So bondage meaning like rope, and domination is like where a lot of times with guys, I was paid to do things like wear women's clothes and get on your knees and kiss my feet and things
Right.
like that. That's domination. Sadism is the act of getting off or being aroused or stimulated by someone else's pain. And masochism is the opposite of that, which is by receiving, by being spanked, by being whipped, that the person actually receives what would be considered exciting
Yeah.
stimulation.
Right.
So if you've ever had a sexual experience where you got a little spanked or something, that's the light version of BDSM.
Right. Yeah.
Or if like a woman says to a man, you know, eat me or something like that, then that's kind of domination.
Right. Right.
So it comes in a lot of flavors. And
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, my number one client were cross-dressers.
Right. Wow, that's amazing. That's really
And
interesting.
that's totally interesting, isn't it?
Yeah,
Because I was trans.
exactly. It's crazy how like people see it. Like when I, not that I'm segueing a little bit, but like when I started my transition, people were like I would tell them and they'd be like, yeah, like it's like they seen it before I saw it, you know. And like I had always known, but I just find it so funny that in situations people see you and know that you automatically take a certain role. So even like with that community, the BDSM community, it's like they already knew, you know, and assumed that role on their part because they already assumed your role, if that makes any sense.
Yeah,
Right?
it was totally odd to me, especially when guys would want me to wear like a strap on or something.
Yeah.
So I was just like, okay, you know, and to me it was like, okay, trying something else, you know, because I tend to try anything, you know, a couple of times and decide if I like it. Usually
Right.
try it with more than one person.
Right.
I was explorative. I was happy to explore sexuality, and it definitely helped me heal. Remember, I was raped at 5 and 8.
Wow.
So I was able to take those instances and they literally became isolated incidences.
Right.
That they no longer had a huge impact on me, and that I didn't walk around afraid of men. I didn't walk around afraid that if you touch me in a certain way, it would trigger old memories. I wasn't afraid of those memories. Those memories were part of who I was, and I wasn't afraid of those feelings because of my work in the BDSM, because I became empowered. I became sexually empowered for sure. As a dominatrix, in those last few years as a dominatrix, I became sexually empowered. I became so empowered that I left.
Wow.
Because for like the last 5 or 10 years, I didn't know any other way to make money.
Right. Right.
I had made so much money that way. And I was available to raise my son.
Look at that. See, that's the whole thing. It's just like, well, not going off topic, but like you were saying about the exploring. I think that when you don't give yourself the opportunity to explore is when it starts becoming like, okay, you got the opportunity to explore. It ended up empowering you. When you don't allow yourself that opportunity, you stifle yourself. That's when it starts becoming, you start doing things that can get out of hand because you're not, or your thoughts or whatever, people keeping that inside, they're not exploring their sexuality. And then it has nothing to do with gay or anything like that. It has to do with, do I like this? No, I don't like this. Does this work for me or doesn't it? And I think when you don't explore is when you start going down a dark path because you don't know. And then people start cheating, people start destroying families, all because they weren't honest and open from the door and saying, hey, I want to explore, I want to try this or I want to try that. and you don't have a healthy sex life. In the end, you
Right.
just don't have a healthy sex life.
Yeah,
So,
and I would totally agree with you. And the interesting part about all of that is that I came to the conclusion that I actually remember I'm working with women,
mhm,
tons of beautiful models
yeah.
with women. And in fact, I was even married to a woman, and the two of us did lesbian stuff
Right.
and we got paid really well. And so, in a lot of ways, it empowered me to explore that. And, I was empowered enough to say, hey, I think I can be lesbian. And also, it empowered me to say to my wife and say, I think I might be trans.
Mm,
And, and to be able to awaken
right.
to I'm trans, and it did come through my sexuality, and I think
Mm,
that's okay. I know
right.
that not all of us, not all trans people have it come through their sexuality. Some
Right.
people have it in a different way, but that's definitely how mine came through. And it
Mm,
doesn't make me bad or shamed.
right.
And it just is. I just realized that I was having gender dysphoria, and that I actually seen myself as more of a masculine person.
Yeah.
And I was actually more comfortable with that. And I was able to explore that because of my sexuality being so open. It was
Right.
already wide open. I'd already opened every other door. And that was just the last one. And the more I worked with cross dressers that were challenged. I mean, some of these guys were so ashamed of themselves.
No.
It was
Yeah.
sad. And, but at the same time, they would push me to question about my own gender.
Right.
And that's what pushed me through. And I think it's interesting that I was sent that all of these cross dressers were knocking down my door,
Right.
and I thought it was interesting that that happened. And I was just like, okay, well, I don't know why, but they just love me. And gosh, I think I might kind of like them too.
Right.
And, I really wanted to explore gender expression and through sexuality. I think
Yeah.
it's a perfectly great place and opening place to explore your gender identity.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I have a great comment here from Alan. He's got great comments. There's something to be said by taking what you're afraid of, dominant, submission, bondage, and put it into an environment where you have control and consent. It's powerful and emotionally liberating. 100%.
Yes.
100%. I
And
agree.
that's exactly what happened. And because I had all the control, there was nothing to be afraid of. Because
Right.
I could say yay, nay, I could say go get out, and
Right.
I could say to a guy I didn't like, get him out of here, and
Right.
they would remove him.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we're going to take a break real quick. And if you have any questions, just think of them. And we're going to get into some more interesting talk when we get back. All right.
WLFE Digital Broadcast Network is on TV. You can watch all of our shows on WLFE-DB.com. Check out our channels: Paranormal View for all of your paranormal type shows, LGBTQ Friends for all of our LGBTQ shows, Variety Unlimited for all other shows. It runs 24/7 right on WLFE-DB.com. You'll even catch the lives, all in one place. Never miss an episode, past or future. WLFE-DB.com, where our shows are your shows. Search for your favorite shows like Where's My Sage, Inside the Drag Closet, Across the Pond, Everything Yet Nothing, Paratalk Radio, Step into the Paranormal, The Creepy Parlor, Just Cindy, and more. Now you won't miss an episode. Remember, follow Facebook Live and YouTube Live. Make sure you subscribe and follow your favorite WLFE-DB radio shows. You can find our shows where you listen to your favorite podcasts, like Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and more. WLFE-DB Radio is looking for podcasts to join our family. You don't have to fit any strict genre. We're a plethora of shows. If you're looking to jump on a growing network, then contact us at WLFEDBradio@gmail.com.
Wow, Amazon Music just got a whole lot better. Your favorite shows from WLFE-DB Radio can now be found there. Yes, we are on Amazon Music, found under podcasts. Download the app, find podcasts, and search all of your favorite shows. Shows like Where's My Sage? Across the Pond, Everything Yet Nothing, Skeptical Help Bar, The Creepy Parlor, Just Cindy, and much more. Now you don't have to miss an episode ever. Amazon Music is WLFE-DB Radiofied.
More from WLFE-DB Radio Network after this.
Hey guys and dolls, this is Casey DeVille, the better half of DeVille Inc., Baltimore, Maryland. If you're ever in Baltimore, stop in and see me and Tony. Invisible Brie, 5920 Eastern Avenue, Baltimore, Maryland, 21224. Give us a call if you're in the area at 410-400-9641, or look us up on the web at DeVilleInc.com. DeVille Inc., where we specialize in you.
Oh, yeah. Life just got sweeter now that WLFE-DB has merchandise. Show your support by purchasing your t-shirts for WLFE, Paratalk Radio, Inside the Drag Closet, and more. But it doesn't stop there. T-shirts, coffee mugs, tanks, buttons, cloth bags, and more. Go to WLFE-DB.com. On the top bar, click on the merchandise tab and bam, there you go. You got merch. Support the shows. WLFE-DB.com. You're listening to WLFE-DB Radio. Now, back to our program.
Okay, we're back.
Fantastic.
So, yeah. And I should let everybody know that Hollis and I do a Sunday show, Rainbow Soul, and we talk about spirituality. So, guys, make sure you check that out.
Yeah, it's an interesting show because, well, the other thing that being an adult star did was it gave me a lot of time, a lot of free time to do things and explore things, and a lot of freedom to go to pagan events and explore my spirituality. Because remember, I'm a pretty explorative person.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah. So it's
Definitely.
great for me.
So I want to touch on being trans, what it is, and I want us to be able to bring your book into this. I think that would be a nice way of explaining to everyone because I want to emphasize everybody's journey is different. Everybody's level of trans is different. And there is no right or wrong way to be trans. So I think that this is a really neat perspective that Hollis can share with us on their journey.
Well, let me just tell you a little bit how I got there, because as I started to explore my gender variance, that's what I call it. That's kind of my umbrella term for all cross-dressing, drag people, everything, okay? So when I started to explore my gender variance, I had the realization that I was probably trans because I had friends that were trans. And they would share their experience. And I was in college as an adult. And I went to Gay Straight Alliance meeting. And this trans person shared their story. And I was like, oh my gosh, that totally resonates with me. That happens to me. Oh my gosh. And the more I heard their story, the more it resonated with me. I would say that what happened after that was I started to make choices for myself. So I did explore first. I thought, well, maybe I'm not trans. Maybe I just need to be with women. So I was with women, and not just sexually, but emotionally in a committed relationship. where I was truly lesbian, right? And even in that, I came to the conclusion that I was trans. And I went to a therapist, and we worked through a lot of my trauma. We did a lot of CBT. EBT is tapping. It's when you're having a trauma response and you tap. I find that tapping on my forehead is actually can be helpful sometimes, especially on my third eye, if I'm having a meltdown. So I had to separate my trauma from who I was. And then I realized, I think I'm actually trans, especially when I started praying. I started diving deep into yoga. And yoga is very alchemical, in case you didn't know. What happens is you're breathing, so there's one element. You're moving your body at the same time with the breath. Now, at the time, I was 270 pounds. I was I'm not even 5 feet. Okay. I was a very big person. And I started to do yoga and do this breathing and focus. And the more I would focus, what I started focusing on was changing my body to meet what I actually felt and to explore what I actually felt. And that's what I write about in this book, is how to do that. How to use tools like yoga, Tai Chi, and other spiritual tools to figure out who you are. Without the influence of a religion, without the influence of other things. And what happened was I had trans friends, and we went out to the club one night. I was having a hard time, and she was like, she's a trans woman, and she was like, well, let's go out and have a drink. So we went to the club, and who did I find but a whole bunch of drag queens? And they were performing, and in fact, this guy even proposed to his now drag wife, whom is my drag mom, Jade DeVito.
Okay.
But they didn't know me, and I didn't know them at the time, okay? And I had to go to the bathroom, and I went behind stage, and I was like, let me talk to a drag queen, because I had seen in their show, they had one drag king come out. And I was like, oh, I could do that. Oh my gosh, I think I could even do that a little bit better, right? And so there was my ego, but that's okay. You have to have an exercise for your ego. And so I came in, and they were like, oh yeah, honey, you can join amateur drag race. And they gave me the information, and we exchanged contact information so I could get on the list. And when I started to explore drag, as I began to perform, first of all, I was pretty much a male impersonator. I looked like a guy when you seen me. That's what it meant. I passed in the trans world. Okay? Except for my voice.
Right.
So as long as I didn't say anything, people thought I was a guy. Okay? I could walk down the street, and I even got he pronouns, especially from the drag community. They had no problem giving me he pronouns. And even my partner started using he pronouns, especially when I was in drag. And I started getting those pronouns. And the more I was in it, I realized that although he was part of me, that wasn't all of me. Right. That I couldn't help that I was in this body. And so I was like, well, I'm going to stay doing drag because I like doing drag. Drag is great. It's great medicine, and we could go on about that for a while. But at some point, I just said, I actually think I might be both. And we were having a ceremony in my backyard, and my godson said to me, hey, and I explained this feeling that I think I might be both. And he was a very open-minded young man. And I said that to him, and he was like, doesn't alchemy celebrate that? You know, the alchemical fire circle people, don't they celebrate that? And in my exploration, I quickly came to this symbology.
Right.
Which this symbology is pretty simple. This is a rebis, R-E-B-I-S. You can look it up. And it's an ancient symbol from alchemy. Alchemy's been around for a very long time. I'm not even sure how long. Long time. Okay?
Right.
And it is essentially the balance of opposites, male and female. And it is seen as a sacred expression in the alchemical world. And I had happened to know, because I had been part of another group that ended up not being a very good group. It was actually a cult. But there was a group that came and visited them that brought a healing modality to them called an alchemical fire circle. So I was like, oh my gosh, I think you might be right. And he kind of inspired me to go back to my community. But I could avoid the cult this time because that's where we knew each other from. And he didn't want to go back to the cult either. Okay.
Right.
And I went back to the alchemical fires. I eventually went back to a community that I was pretty sure was involved with the alchemical fires, and I had planned to go. But here's the funny story. So I was doing my Hobbit, which came from my drag. And
I remember that.
Yeah. And this guy who I happened to know was like, hey, can you come be in my fairy festival? I was like, okay. And he's totally cool with trans people. It's a very trans accepting community because they're part of the alchemical community. Okay. So they see me, they're like, we don't care if we're glad you're trans. Come on.
Right.
And I was celebrated there. And that's where I met my partner. And that's where I got the download to start working with the elderly. And that's how we started traveling in a van around the country. The interesting part about that, working with the elderly, they had dementia. Okay. So I would come up to them and offer them to dance. Now, about 80% of the population in nursing homes are female, by the way.
Oh, wow.
Because most of the time, men, they die off early. Okay. And the women are kind of living a long time in these homes. And so I would invite them to dance. And the interesting part about it was they would see me as a guy. Right. They would be like, some of them would question, some of them would say, are you a boy or a girl? And I would say, does it matter? And they'd be like, I guess not. Yeah. Because they're like 90, right?
Yeah, right.
But a lot of them would be like, oh, you're my boyfriend from high school.
Oh.
And I'd be like, okay. Because they're just dancing. We're just dancing together in the middle of the room. And it's good for them to have exercise. And I'm a CNA. So that means a certified nursing assistant. So I'm licensed to help elderly move around. And so when my partner and I started doing this around the nation, it was like the greatest job for somebody like me because more than half of the population seen me as a guy.
Right.
They never questioned it. They seen me who I was. They seen beyond my body, and they seen in my eyes that I was non-binary.
Right. There's something validating about that, when other people see it, that they don't like. I mean, I still get every now and again, you get the few that they'll use the wrong pronoun with me, and I'll just be like, what do you see? Like, let's just put everything else aside, and what do you genuinely see? How can you say like the wrong pronoun and literally look at me? Like, I don't get it. But there is something so beautiful and so validating when somebody just genuinely sees you, And it's not just like you say, the passing, as they put it. It's they literally see, like, even before I started therapy or anything, people just saw me. They didn't see anything else. So yeah, that's a
Now,
beautiful
what
thing.
did end up happening was before COVID, right before COVID and the years leading up to COVID, my cycle, I still had my cycle, and I had accepted my cycle that it would probably end soon because of my age. And I just assumed that I would be menopausal. So I'm just going to use the word. A lot of people don't use it, but I'm going to use it because it's important. A lot of people don't talk about it. And I started feeling the changes in my body, but they got really bad. Those feelings got real. I got really sick at COVID when COVID happened. And of course we had to stop visiting the nursing homes. I mean, I visited nursing homes right up till the time in fact, the last one I went to, they gave hand sanitizer to everybody. We didn't know about masks yet. And I danced with a whole bunch of people in LA at a adult daycare, and it was really beautiful. And then we also did a small one in Arizona, and it was kind of the same thing. They tested they wanted to see if I had a fever on the way in. Anyway, I never developed a fever, but I did get very sick, and it wasn't COVID. It was actually my hormones. And I had to go to a doctor and all this other stuff. And thank goodness I live in Colorado, and that's where I'm registered at, because the doctors here are very open-minded. When you live in Colorado, it's not unusual to be trans. You can go into a grocery store in Boulder, Colorado, and ask for they pronouns, and they'll give them to you.
Right.
It's not weird out here, okay?
Right.
And so I went to the doctor, and they've been covering this for a long time. And they were like, oh, well, we're not going to put you on estrogen then. If you're non-binary, we're going to put you on testosterone. Right. And I also found out I had a heart condition. And that's why I got so sick. And I was born with it. Are you ready for this? I was born with a big heart.
Oh, very good. That speaks a lot.
That's exactly what I said to my...
It makes sense.
My doctor told me that I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. So, but I'm okay, and I'm not going to have a heart attack or anything, and I can exercise and move my body, but I have to be on some medication so I'm not uncomfortable while my hormones do this shift. Yeah. I've decided to naturally go through the change for health reasons. It would be better for me, for my health. Right. And I think that that's why the trans journey is different for all of us. Yes. All of us are in a different body, and our bodies don't all respond to things in the same way. And for me to take hormones before I got sick was kind of not in my... I didn't want to for numerous reasons. Number one, blood clots run in my family. Number two, I wasn't comfortable with synthetic hormones. I'm not comfortable with synthetic anything. Yeah, it's okay. Bless you. And I'm not even comfortable with the synthetic hormones I'm on now, but I don't have any choice because of my health. And I'm glad that they understood and were like, well, we're not going to put you on estrogen. We're going to put you on testosterone instead because it makes more sense. Yeah. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful to have doctors that considered all of me. They even said that. Well, we have to consider all of you while we're treating you. And I'm so grateful for that. And there was a reason why I had to move to Colorado. I used to live in Pennsylvania. My drag king was born in Pennsylvania. So that's how I'm part of Lacrosse's family, drag family. And, you know, that's why this is why I had to be out here, so that I could be treated in a way that was more holistic, because that's my medicine. My medicine is holistic. And that's what my book is even about. It's about holistically becoming your most authentic self.
Right.
And if you're gender variant, this will speak to you. Even if you're not gender variant, like my partner's not gender variant, but she was still like, this is still a valid book, even if you're not trans.
Right. Because if you're thinking about just becoming your authentic self, I mean, yes, being trans that's the journey, but it can apply to anybody being your authentic self regardless. So, yeah.
And you don't have to judge others. I didn't have to say to other people that were choosing to take hormones that it was wrong for them, because it wasn't necessarily wrong for them. It was okay for them. And I think every single person on their trans journey has to make that decision, whatever that looks like for you. Like, there's just too much to consider. Not just that, but your value system and your belief system, your spirituality, all of those things need to be taken into consideration.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I myself, I decided to take the hormones. Sadly, now at this point, I have to cut my dose back big time due to heart condition because I have bad blood pressure. So I had to cut it back to like microdosing. But I mean, to me, it was more, I had to get the surgeries done. That's where I felt complete. Once I had all my surgeries done, then I'm like, even if I have to get off the testosterone, that doesn't really matter. What matters is I've become my authentic self, and I took that journey, and this is where mine led me. So that's where yours led you. Like I said, there's no right or wrong journey. There's just the journey,
Exactly. And that's, and that's what's most important. And to be frank with you, if we could teach kids to just be their most authentic self from the get-go, I think our world would greatly benefit. And that's why I did the other book. That's why I did this book. I'm the publisher of this book. My partner wrote this book. This is a book, the entire thing uses gender-neutral pronouns.
Nice.
No time are any of the characters gendered, which is priceless when you're raising kids.
Yeah.
I mean,
because they're trying to figure their little minds out and what's going on.
And what it means to be, you can order that book at my website too, but it's a really special book, and the artist that did the work, everybody involved is a trans ally. Yeah. And that's why I have, and you can see in the background of the show here, Seahorse Publications. That's why I started that. And I give you my quick seahorse story. So while I was on the road, I was pretty sure I was both, and I was trying to embrace being both and what that really meant. And I was finishing up my book, and I went to Hawaii. I was lucky enough to go to Hawaii, and I went to the Seahorse Sanctuary. I took a little baby there, and I went to the Seahorse Sanctuary, and I got this whole story about this seahorse who saved all the other seahorses. But what was really special about the visit was I set this small little baby down that I was watching for somebody, and I put my hands in this tank, and this little seahorse came up and wrapped their tail around my pinky, and laid down in my hand and looked at me like I was one of them.
Wow.
And in that moment, I knew that seahorses, their gender bending ways, that was my totem. Wow. And I was like, wow, what a powerful moment.
That is beautiful.
Yeah.
That is definitely beautiful. Well, make sure everybody check out the books. We have the ticker going. So if you didn't grab it, grab it. Where you can find Hollis, where you can find these books, I think they would be great. It's definitely great to add to the collection. And thank you, Hollis, so much for coming and sharing your story with us. I think it can benefit stories are medicine. And if it could touch one person out there, that'd be amazing, and give somebody a different perspective on what being trans is, what sex work is. I mean, it can open so many doors. So I just want to thank you so much for being a part of the show.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm very grateful to be on your show. I think it's fantastic to celebrate everybody's story.
Thank you. Same. And with that, thank you everybody for being a part of the show and coming and visiting. And we will see you all next week, where I will be having Ted Vance on. He is the one who's running WLFEDB.com, which is where we have the joy of having our show. So check out Rainbow Soul. Check me out again next Thursday. And thank you all for stopping by. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks so much for tuning into this week's episode on Through Kaleidoscope Eyes. I sure do hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. If you haven't done so, make sure to subscribe to the show. See you next week.